my name is Bianca Escobar, and I am the Family Services Supervisor for TOSA. I've been at TOSA for 7 years. I started out as the Family Services Coordinator and then a Senior Coordinator and moved up to the supervisory role. Prior to this, I had a role as a Programs Director at a nonprofit. I would say specifically for this role, my background is in chaplaincy, which has really helped me have more skills to be present with families. A lot of times we say that family services coordinators are actually the first face of donation. For a lot of families, when we meet with them, it may be the very first time that they're hearing about donation. So the conversation in itself is very tailored, very gentle and tender, and also is very focused on presenting the opportunity to help families decide whether saving lives is right for them and for their loved one. So we work with a lot of different staff members, but ultimately we are the very first people that are sharing about donation with a family. Timing is really critical, as I'm sure you can imagine. There are some keys that families will give that sort of show that it may be a little bit of a better time. We always say that a family will almost never be truly ready, right? There's a lot of grief surrounding this because they've lost their loved one. And at the same time, it is a very time sensitive conversation. But a lot of times, nurses will say that maybe the family's asking what are the next steps, or they're already talking about funeral homes, or they're talking about having a lot of loved ones come in and say goodbye. So there are some of the clues that we hear that pinpoint that a family may be a little bit more in a space to receive information. The readiness is present, but it always varies case by case. So we do our best to just sort of tailor all of that to that specific family so that we can really serve them to the best of our ability. It's really helpful if hospital staff shares any additional insight on family dynamics, maybe how they're receiving information, who the main family members are in terms of decision making or influence, if you will. Just any of those additional pieces of insight can really help frame the conversation. I think one of the biggest struggles that we face sometimes is when families have chosen to stop treatment, they already have a beautiful withdrawal plan in place. And sometimes it's really hard to present a new idea to them. So if hospital staff can help sort of alert us to those things, then it really helps frame a conversation a little bit better. Family conversations are very nuanced and they do vary. We always say you should not be robotic. Each family has different needs, and we do our best to sort of adapt and meet those needs. At the same time, a family conversation does have a general flow that we sort of follow. Of course, we introduce ourselves, we offer condolences, we do our best to offer any kind of support or see if there are other needs that need to be met. If a family is worried about something and that's at the top of their mind, then they may not be in a space to receive donation information. So we do our best to sort of assess those needs and see if I need to connect them with maybe the chaplain or child life before they can have a more detailed conversation with us. And then once that sort of has been done, we also make sure that we can hear from them their understanding of what has happened. If their person was pronounced brain dead, it's important to hear from them that they truly understand that. And so we will oftentimes ask, like, what is their understanding of what they've been told? What have they been told? And that's really a chance for them to sort of repeat or reframe what they've heard about their loved one or the decision that they've made if they've decided to stop treatment. After that point, there is room for storytelling. We love storytelling. It's very important. I had a family who started crying as soon as I asked about her loved one, and I thought this is common. She's thinking of her loved one, but then she started to cry and say that no one had asked about him in 3 days, and that meant a lot to her. So the storytelling was an opportunity for her to share about him and her life with him, and it also gave us an opportunity to kind of go into donation when we made that transition and help her kind of see how donation would fit the legacy that she wanted to give him. So that's a general overview of the conversation. And then, of course, once there's room and donation has been presented, then we talk a little bit about what donation looks like. First person authorization follows the same format in terms of our conversation. The only difference being that when we, excuse me, transition to presenting the registry, we share with families that they may or may not be aware that their loved one had made this decision to save lives and that they'd recorded that decision on the Texas Donor Registry. We really present it as the decision that their loved one made, and we do our best to address any concerns that they may have. But it is very important to inform them that their loved one made this decision so that they would not have to make it for them. While we wish the donation were right for every family, we also understand that it is not right for every family for various reasons. And so if a family says no, then it is really important that we dive a little bit deeper and figure out what is behind the no. Sometimes a no is a no, not right now, or no, I'm not understanding, or they're just too caught up in their grief to receive more information. So when a family says no, we ask some open-ended questions to sort of keep the conversation going and learn a little bit more about what's behind that no. Once the family receives all the information about donation, then if they still feel like it is not right for them, then we of course accept and respect that. This is all done in a very compassionate, understanding way. And we always say that if a decision is one that is informed, meaning they have all the information, if it's enduring, it's one that they're not going to regret in the future. And if it's proactive, meaning that were circumstances different and this were any other day, they would still decline donation, then we know that we've done everything we could to support them, have this conversation, and we kind of move forward and figure out what else do they need in a way that we can sort of close the conversation and create or cultivate and keep cultivating a positive donation culture, even if it's not right for that particular family member right in front of us. One of my favorites was a physician who said, there's no way they're going to say yes to this. This group of people, they do not donate. It was a particular ethnicity. And I went in and the family just had one cultural request that they wanted us to honor. And if we could honor that, then they were totally on board for donation. And that's really important too, in terms of storytelling and building a relationship with the family, is getting to know a little bit, right? It's just a glimpse of who they are as a family unit, and assuring them that we will do our best to meet any sort of needs that they have, or requests that are important for end of life rituals. So it's always exciting when we see those happen, when everyone thinks that the family will not say yes to donation, but you see how it transforms them. There are still a lot of myths about donation. I think it's improving, but just recently I had a family say, well, they would have saved her if they'd seen her driver's license. So there's still this myth surrounding efforts made to save someone. So it's really important to sort of separate, and we say decouple a conversation, make sure that families don't get confused by the healthcare team actually caring for their patient and our team who's present for donation. That's still a pretty big misconception. And then families also think that when they say yes to donation, it means they're not going to have any more time with their loved one. There's this idea of a family said, whisking their loved one away, just taking them away completely. And a lot of times, as you know, donation is actually a little bit slower than that, oftentimes requiring an extra day or two or more. And for a lot of families, that brings them a lot of peace. And so it's really important to sort of explore that as well. While it may not be appropriate for every family, not every family needs that extra time, the majority of families we have found really appreciate that extra time. And that's really when you can see the power of donation, in the sense of how it doesn't take away the grief and the pain, but it does transform them. Nurses have also commented, you might see a family start to eat from the bereavement cart that you've ordered, and they're sharing more stories and they're laughing. Or maybe it's a mother who's finally able to leave for a little bit and go home and shower, knowing that she's coming back and she'll get to still spend some more time with her son. The grief is transformed in just a little bit of a different way. So those are some of the biggest things, that there is time. And also the other would be that they can still have their funeral arrangements and their plans. There's a lot of misconception around that as well. So really emphasizing to a family that that is still possible, and that the entire organ donation journey is done with the utmost dignity and respect for their loved one and for them as a family. Donation still seems really mysterious, even to hospital staff. You may not have ever, quote unquote, worked a donor case. We don't use that verbiage with families, but with you, you may never have worked a donor case, or maybe you have and you're not as familiar. I think knowing that every donor situation is different, and so remaining curious and open and asking questions. We love questions as coordinators. We want to share information with you. And also, if you want to be present for a family conversation, talk with the coordinator that you're working with, because you can be present for that. We would just ask that you just observe, purely observational, so that family doesn't get confused by anything. But that can help remove some of the mystery. And then it's always really important, if your hospital has any, tree of life ceremonies or flag raisings or blankets or quilts that are given, to attend those things and be part of that, because you can also see sort of the ripple effects of donation out into the community. I know hospital development staff shares reports on how many lives were saved or consent rates in that hospital. So learning that information can also feel really inspiring for you. I love when nurses will say, hey, I was taking care of that patient back, 2 weeks ago. Do you know what happened? I love being able to share how many lives were saved, because we could not do this work without you, without each of you, no matter what your role is. If you're RT, chaplain, social work, nurse, everyone involved really helps get us to this point. And so I think learning more about donation, staying curious, being honest with your own grief and feelings about it. Like, we all need a moment to step away. And sometimes donation can make everything feel sadder in a way. But you see how families are transformed by it. And so just leaning into that a little bit can really make a difference. And I think also too, just remembering that if a family didn't want donation, they would say no. So the families that say yes, they do want it. And even the families that may struggle with, for example, a loved one's decision to register, even if they're still struggling with that, we've had several families say, I'm really glad that they did this. It may take them a few days to get there, but they get to that point. I love stories, obviously. So one story I love to share is a family that was really struggling with the registry. They just could not believe that their person had signed up, and they were struggling with how it was going to change everything for them. And by the time we fast forwarded 3 days, and by the time it was time for the recovery and the hospital held an honor walk, there were about 75 family members and friends, and they were cheering for her and saying her name, just filled with such pride that she was going to be saving lives. So holding on to those things is really important, knowing that donation is positive and it truly makes a lasting impact, not only for that family and their friends, but also for the community and maybe even for generations to come.